I'll tell some seniors in high school, high school students, whatever. I'm like, hey, you ever heard of a TED Talk? Like, yeah. I'm like, cool. I'm like, adults always want to do TED Talks. It's a big deal. I've done 3 of them. This is when I'm establishing authority. I don't say that with them anymore because they care more that I was on America's Got Talent than I did 3 TED Talks, right?
Know your audience, right?
Know your audience, right? They're like, what? Who's Ted?
In this episode, you'll get to know SaulPaul, the musician with a message. And you'll hear the story of how he went from being in foster care and prison to inspiring people around the world as a Grammy-nominated musician. I'm Dave Crenshaw, and this is My Success Show. Welcome back, friends, to the Dave Crenshaw Success Show. This is where I speak to some of the most successful people I've met in my life's journey. And I'm looking for universal principles of success, things that can help you and help my family succeed. In case it's your first time here, I'm a best-selling author. I speak around the world to Fortune 500 companies, and I've helped millions of people through my online courses, particularly on LinkedIn Learning. With this show, I wanted to create something a little different. I wanted to create sort of a legacy project to help my kids succeed, but I thought you'd enjoy learning along with them. I interview people who have multifaceted success, not just success financially or career, but people who also have rich personal lives and have fun as well. And if you know someone who you think would make a great guest or someone you admire, please email your suggestion to guest@davecrenshaw.com. As you listen to today's episode, I'd like you to do one thing. Look for something you can do. Look for an action you can take today or this week to make my guest success story a part of your success story. This episode is special. We're going to have a little bit of music. We're going to have a little fun, a little bit of freestyle in this. So I'm really excited to introduce my next guest to you. SaulPaul is a Grammy-nominated musician with a message. He's presented 3 TEDx talks, performed at the Kennedy Center for Performing Arts, and has been featured by the New York Times and on America's Got Talent. SaulPaul's foundation partners with organizations like the NFL and Dell to empower young people to discover their purpose and place in the workforce. He performs in schools, in corporations, and most recently at South by Southwest. SaulPaul, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for the invitation. Been looking forward to this.
So I first saw you in prison. You weren't an inmate in the prison, but you were performing for the people in prison.
We did meet some amazing people while we were there in prison, though, didn't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was pretty amazing. Globe, Arizona, Hustle 2.0, getting to go as a business coach and listen to some business plans and business pitches from some currently incarcerated individuals who are about to transition back here to the free world. That was inspiring.
And to paint the picture for people who weren't there, we were out in the courtyard of the prison and you put on a show. I was there with my son and it was happening during the beautiful Arizona sunset.
Yeah, that was quite the honor. And I got to meet not only some inmates that were amazing, but some amazing individuals like yourself while being there as well.
Yeah, for sure. So what we're going to do is we're going to explore your career story. And I like to ask the same question of every guest, but I especially like asking you this because I know you do a lot of work with children. You go to schools, you talk to them. And so I'm going to ask you the question that almost every kid gets asked, which is, what did you want to be when you grew up? So little SaulPaul, what did you think that you were going to be in the future when you first started getting ideas about, careers exist?
That is an amazing question. What did I want to be when I grew up? I just wanted to be successful. And it was vague. Now I ask that question to young people all the time. I ask it to other peers and adults as well. And if they gave me that answer, successful, I'd be like, that's not specific. That's like, we need a SMART goal. But for me, when I was little SP, my goal was just general and vague. I wanted to be successful. And that was a big deal to me because at that point, I had not witnessed many successful people. I did not grow up in an environment where I saw others succeed, others living their best life, others being gainfully employed, others having nice things.
What was it that you were exposed to? What did it look like for you?
Drugs, violence, murder, poverty, homelessness, broken homes, single parents. That's what I grew up in and around.
I think that's a great place for us to start because I'm always inspired by someone who grew up in an environment where you were exposed to nothing other than that. and yet you found a way to carve a path through that. And my understanding too is that you lost your mother at a very young age. Is that true as well?
I did lose my mother at a very young age. I lost my mom when I was 3 years old, and I lost, my father was never around. So the way I usually share it is my mom died when I was 3. She died in a car accident. My dad left before I was born. So through no fault of my own, I was placed in foster care. So I don't know if you can miss what you never had. I still remember being at my mother's funeral at 3 years old. But it did work out for me because though I was placed in foster care, I was adopted by my maternal grandmother.
Oh.
Her name was Pearlie. Everybody called her Big Mama. I ultimately grew up calling her Mama. She was the only mother that I knew. She was 65 years my elder. She raised me as an only child, even though she had previously raised 16 children of her own. So it was just me and Pearlie, me and Mama.
Wow. That's so remarkable that she did that. And I know that you have a ton of respect for her. I've even heard you honor her in your music.
Yeah, one of my most popular songs is a song called Mama, but it was written because of her as an ode to her and my experience with her sacrificing and creating space for me to become who I am.
So this is a unique situation. I don't get to interview musicians very often. And you're sitting there, for someone who isn't seeing this on video, you're sitting there with your guitar in hand. Can you give us just like a brief riff, like a 10 to 15 second riff on that song about your grandmother?
Wow. Let me see.
I'm putting you on the spot here.
Got it. Let's see. I grew up poor, and I ain't even know it. When we lacked dough, she ain't even show it. She kept me focused, eyes on the textbooks. Now I'm living good. Look how them checks look. She taught me about love. She taught me about life. Showed me what was wrong and taught me what was right. Then she let me live my life, but I made mistakes. She still showed me love, so I guess she taught me grace.
Oh, that's beautiful. And what I love about that is you just answered my question. My next question, which was, what did she teach you? And that was fantastic. We got to hear that in song form. Thank you.
Thank you.
So she taught you all those things, but I know not everything in your life was smooth sailing in addition to that, right?
Yeah, not at all.
Would you mind sharing a little bit about what were some of the mistakes that you made in your journey early on?
The mistakes that I made were not understanding boundaries, not appreciating the value of structure and rules. And that's a fancy way to say I broke the law. So by the time I was 17, I was arrested by the FBI.
Wow. Would you mind sharing just a brief bit about what that was that you were arrested for?
Yeah, well, the setup to it is very interesting. I love, I made good grades in school, elementary, middle school, high school. I was in the gifted and talented program. I had a natural talent, natural gift. Glad that I still have it. I'm an intelligent individual. That came natural, so I didn't have to apply myself. So I made good grades without trying. But that was my secret because in the community I grew up in, that wasn't celebrated. So I got teased for making good grades. But when I would get in trouble in school, I would inadvertently get attention. So then in my mind, I figured out, wow, I can become the best at being the worst and I'll get the most quote unquote love. So it was logical, illogic, thus illogical. But, that was my logic. So by the time I'm 17, I'm growing up in poverty. I see people in my neighborhood doing various things to get money, the ones that did have money. And so I realized I wanted to get some money. So what I did was simply make money, right? Like people sell drugs to make money. I was like, hey, let's just cut out the middleman. I'll just make money. And that's what I did. I made money. If anybody picks up what I'm saying without being too candid. But my first charge was for making counterfeit money.
And I want to pause on that for a second because, we talked about the context of meeting through Hustle 2.0. You weren't in that program because it's fairly new, but they talk about the idea that, and we use the phrase inmates. I did that because people who are unfamiliar they'd wonder if I used a different word. But the word they like to use is mavericks.
Mavericks.
And the idea is that these guys, these gals in prison, they do have talent. They do have skill. They're just misapplying it. Yeah. And that's exactly what was happening here. You're in the gifted program. You're ambitious. You're success oriented. And you applied those skills. You just did it in the wrong way.
Correct.
But I really think that's important for your story, because now you're applying all those gifts and those skills in a positive way to impact change in the world, change people's lives. I think that's a beautiful comparison for people to see the difference between the two.
It's why I do what I do. 17, I get arrested by the FBI. I realize like this is a platform for me to get love. I like to highlight. People miss it. People act as if those that are incarcerated are so foreign, but they're not. The reality is, of the 7 billion plus people on the planet, we all want love. And so people get it different ways. Some people play sports to get it. Some people do well in school. Others succeed in business. Some give back. Me, at this point in life, I'm like, wow, the way that I can get love is become the best at being the worst. But I didn't fully think that through because I'm still just a juvenile. I'm just a young person. Didn't have a lot of guidance, didn't have mentorship and others in my life, and then listen to the ones that I did have. So I continued down that path. And by the time I'm 20, I'm convicted of 4 felonies. And now I'm sitting in the Texas State Penitentiary. And I'm wondering to myself, like, wow, how did I go from the gifted and talented program to like being convicted of 4 felonies, having 10 years and sitting in the Texas State Penitentiary? And I realized that it was my choices.
No matter what your career is, your foundation of success begins with one thing: effective time management. And thanks to the generosity of Microsoft, you can get my entire course, Time Management Fundamentals, for free on LinkedIn Learning. Go to davegift.com to get your free access now. This is the course that millions around the world have used to become more productive and reduce stress. Everyone from Fortune 500 executives to freelancers to students. Now, it's the same coaching I've provided in person for tens of thousands of dollars per day, but you can get it for free on LinkedIn Learning. You don't need to provide anything to access it. No credit card, no email. Just go to davegift.com and start learning. Thank you so much, Microsoft and LinkedIn Learning, for your partnership. davegift.com. What was the turning point for you in there? Because I know that some people have different experiences in prison. Sometimes they go in, they get bitter, they get hard, they get into the system, that negative system, and they decide, I'm here forever. But others, like you, they have a moment where they make a decision to take a different path. What was that moment for you?
I always try to explain it 2 different ways practically, because the real answer is it's my faith. So yeah, I love to share my faith. So the simple answer is what changed for me was my faith. I went from Saul to Paul. I realized that I was born on purpose with a purpose, and I started walking in that purpose, period.
That's interesting because that explains why you use that name, which is a reference to the biblical story of someone who was basically fighting against God and then changed that. And I like that you also are leaving space to say, look, maybe someone doesn't have that faith, and that's okay for them to have that, but that's your story, and that is very important to your process of change.
That's it exactly. Also, as a speaker, as a teacher, you realize sometimes you understand things, and like how do you break that down into to be able to teach it? So practically, what it looks like for me is I'm 20 years old, convicted of 4 felonies, sent in the Texas State Penitentiary, and I considered my life. I was a very confident individual. I believed in me, but I was real enough to say, great, I'm 20 years old, about to spend my 21st birthday in the Texas State Penitentiary. So the plan that I am working is not working. The culture that I grew up in taught me some things. I did those things. I'm in prison. I realized that if I wanted to get different results, I would have to make different choices. I realized that I would have to divorce myself from what I knew and what I believed. I realized that I would have to separate myself from those that were around me. Even as I was in prison, I realized that I would have to separate myself from the mindset of my community, and that I would have to feed my mind. I would have to develop a vision, come up with the plan, and then move forward toward my new goal. And that's how I made the transition practically.
Yeah, I want to highlight something in there too, which is the separating yourself. One of the turning points for me was recognizing there were people in my life who were giving me all sorts of advice, but had achieved no success themselves.
That part.
And it seemed like maybe you had people in your life who were achieving a kind of success, but it wasn't the kind of success that you wanted to have in your life.
I remember this moment very clearly when I was in prison. I was in the Texas, key part right there, Texas State Penitentiary. We're watching a football game. I wrote about this in my book. I wrote an autobiographical book. It's called Beat the Change. And I share the story in the book, but here's a short version. We're watching this football game in prison in Texas. It's UT football. To set it up, what happens is 17, I get arrested. At the same time, my grandmother passes away. So I'm on my own. My senior year in high school, I couch surf, stay with relatives, and then I got an academic scholarship. I went to the University of Texas at Austin on scholarship, but I didn't have any life skills. And I didn't have any study skills because of my natural talent. Like I made it to college without studying. But that didn't work in college. So I flunk out, lose my academic scholarship, and then I went to the penitentiary. Okay, so back to the story now. So now I'm in the penitentiary. We're watching a UT football game. All eyes are on the TV because that's what you do in prison. And there was this OG. OG is the endearing term you call someone that's like, hey, like that's the dude. We want to be like him, right? So me and the OG and others are watching the game. And I happen to know the players that are on the TV screen. So I'm kind of humble bragging. And like, oh, yeah, I know that dude. I know that dude. The OG is like, how? Right? He's incredulous. Like how? Like, you're in prison with me. How would you know this dude is what he's thinking, right? And I'm like, oh, I used to go to UT. So now he takes his eyes off the TV and he looks at me and he's like, okay, so if you went to UT, then what are you doing here? And I'm like, this is my moment. I have the attention of the OG, the person I respect. He looked at me, he paused. He was in disbelief and he was like, keeping it real. Yeah, son, you were keeping it real stupid. And then he goes back to the football game, right? And so this is a person that I respected, that I wanted to be like, and it changed my worldview. It challenged it because I was like, wow, I was doing this thing for whatever reasons. He did it at the highest level, quote unquote. Later, we had a conversation and he shared like why he did it. He did it because he was trying to make a way for his family, for his children. He didn't have another option. And now here I am who had an option and I was still doing those same dumb things. And so like that was a turning point for me as well when I was in prison and realized like, okay, I need to change my worldview. I've been bought into a system that really did not have my best interest in mind. And if it was a movie, that's the point when you cue the soundtrack and it's like, oh, okay, a shift just happened.
Oh, man, what a great story. And then you were eventually able to get out of prison early for
parole. Yep,
good behavior.
Well, I don't want to perpetuate that myth. It wasn't good behavior. So, but here's the crazy part: like the school to prison pipeline is a real thing. For example, I was in the gifted and talented program. When I would go to school, I wouldn't even get to hang around my friends from my neighborhood because I was in a different track, a different program. Right? I haven't seen friends from elementary, middle school, high school because I always went to schools vary, and then I'm in different classes. I go to college, but when I got to prison, I saw like, hey, that's like TT from elementary. That's Darrell from middle school. That's Herman from high school. And it was mind blowing to me because we all ended up in the same place, even though we went different paths. And it was that school to prison pipeline. So it felt like a family reunion when I got to prison. And the first year I was there, it was not good behavior. It was more like, hey, this is community. And we did more of the stupid stuff. Again, I believe in miracles. So like my faith played a key part. For me, it was more of a principle that I used in life. I understood why I was in prison. I understood what I needed to do with my life. So there was no reason for me to be in prison anymore. And I think that showed, right? It's like if I was grounded, it was like, okay, you get the message now. Now you can go. But it wasn't the system and it wasn't any person. It was more like, okay, I get it.
Okay, that's beautiful. And I want to highlight something there too. Just jump ahead a little bit in your timeline for a second. You talk about the school to prison pipeline. It's an interesting phrase. I haven't heard that before. Is that part of the reason why you focus so much on going to schools and helping the kids out?
Yes, it is.
Is it part of it to break that cycle?
You are a very informed individual. I'm honored to be on your show. You're smart and you're good at what you do. And an informed individual like you hasn't heard of this, and you serve in the space, right? So like, it's just crazy to me that you haven't heard of the school to prison pipeline, only because like it's a thing. Anyone could Google it right now and you would have copious content and realize like, what? This is how they project the amount of prisons to build in a community, in a space. They can tell based on like the third grade reading level of a community, the amount of jails and prisons that they will need. But Google it. I love this. Like, anybody can Google it. Like, you Google that, and it's like, because there's a pipeline. And so education and literacy plays a key part. And yes, that's why we focus so much on working with young people, because we realize that we can impact their lives forever just by impacting them while they're young.
Yeah, well, and I'm just going to highlight this. I don't want to talk all about Hustle 2.0, but I do want to highlight this thing because it relates. One of the questions that they ask, they have the step to the line activity. And if it's true for you, you step up to the line. If you're a coach, if it's not true, you step back. And one of the things that always pops up is there were at least 40 books in our household. It was some number like that. And almost all the coaches step up to the line. So that's true for them. And almost all of the Mavericks step back, saying that they're in their home, they didn't have that many books. So that's really interesting that you're highlighting that, because that is a big differentiator. And I think it's a solvable problem.
It is a solvable problem. That's that entrepreneur in you. I love entrepreneurship. I love business owners because like business is solving a problem, right? And then there's just some compensation added to it. But it's like entrepreneurs see like problems and then we're like, yeah, that's solvable. Like, why is this such a big deal? Hey, let's solve it. Like,
yeah, let's educate kids. Let's be SaulPaul. Let's go into the schools. Let's teach the kids and give them an uplifting message, a good example. Okay, so I want to go back to the exit. And this is important because one of the biggest challenges that people have when they're exiting prison is that first job, that first employment, and starting to get back on the path of gainful employment. What was your first opportunity? What was that experience like for you getting that first job?
Don't take me down memory lane. I take pride in my struggle story.
Yeah.
So I get out. I'm on parole. I'm staying at a relative's house because when you get out on parole, you have to have somewhere to go to. So thank you to my Aunt Bunny, Ernestine Rose, who allowed me to come live in her house and like tell my parole officer, like, he has somewhere to stay. So I'm staying at her house, and I ended up going to a temporary employment space or whatever. They got me a job. I remember I made $5.25 an hour. Absurd.
Doing what?
Counting screws. That was the whole job. Like, no, I would literally count screws.
Counting screws.
I never had, like, there was a scale. You had these boxes. You put the box together. You put the box on the scale. There's some paper, whatever, and okay, this one has 100 or it's based off of weight, and you throw these screws in the box. Okay, it hit the number, you fold it up, you tape it, you set it aside.
So a job like that gives you a lot of time to think. Here I am in this job counting screws. What was going through your mind? Because I'm guessing, knowing you were starting to formulate a way out of that. Is that a correct assumption?
That is it exactly. And I had so much time just to shout out, because sometimes people want to, you can't cheat the process. Here was the process. I had the job. The job was so weird. I want to share this because like this is part of the grind and people have to remember this. So I would wake up. I got the job. I was happy to have the job. To get to work at 8 o'clock, I would have to wake up at 5, walk 30 minutes, like get ready for 30 minutes, walk 30 minutes, catch the bus at 6 a.m. So then it would take 2 hours to get to the job. And then I would get there at 8 o'clock, finish, get off at 5. Then wouldn't get home till 8 o'clock that night. And like, that was life. Then they changed my hours. And to keep the job, I now had to be at work at 4 o'clock. Interesting part is I would get off at 1 o'clock, right? An hour lunch break. So I get off at 1 a.m., but there were no buses. I would get random people. I would catch a cab sometimes, but then I would literally use up my entire workday pay to like catch the cab. So then there was this one guy that would let me ride on the back of his truck. Totally weird situation. There's another story that's in my book. So I'm proud of these moments because we could talk about my resume and all my successes now, but I know how I got there. The guy wouldn't even let me ride in the front of the truck. Like, I realize now he was a functioning alcoholic.
And you're getting in the back of the truck with this guy.
I didn't even think about that part. But yeah, I'm in the back of the truck. And because it was kind of on the way to where he was going, when he would get to like the intersection road, the cross street, he wouldn't even stop, like exit and like take me where I had to go or even let me out on the feeder. It was like 1:30 in the morning now. He would literally just stop on the upper deck of the highway and like let me hop out. And then I would walk from there to a relative's house and get there because it's an hour walk. So I would get there about 2:30 in the morning. And then I would sleep till the sun came up and the buses started working. And then I would catch a bus to my other aunt's house that I mentioned earlier and stay there and then repeat the cycle. But it was also a stipulation of my parole. So I was happy to have a job in general and to have my freedom, and I would do what I had to because I was formulating that plan and I knew where I was going.
Yeah, and I want to highlight that you were willing to do what you had to, even though it maybe questionably wasn't fair. You paid that price to do what needed to be done for parole. You're taking so much time to get to the job and then so much time coming back. And it can trap someone in that cycle of continually paying money to make money. And it sounds like you were in the middle of that.
I was. I got to experience it. My grandmother was so amazing. Though I grew up extremely poor, I knew we weren't rich, but I didn't know how poor we were. So she was a great parent. Like, that wasn't my responsibility. My responsibility was go to school, make good grades. It was only when I became an adult that I realized, like, whoa, we were like lower class. She had shielded me from that, and she bore the burden. But now at this point in life, I'm understanding what it's like to be like, wow, like this is poverty. This is not right. And life's not fair. So that's a word I don't use. But yeah, I was like, yeah, this is not it. My self-talk is, this ain't it. Okay, yeah, no, I'm going to ride this out. I'm going to grind this out. But like, this ain't it. This can't be life. And it was during that I was formulating my plan. And what happened is the way the timeline progresses is I ultimately, I did that for a year. I transferred my parole from Houston to Austin. I got readmitted to UT, the University of Texas. So I went to UT while I was on parole. This is unheard of. I recall one day that I went to go see my parole officer because you have to see them each month. It just so happened that I went to go see my parole officer on the same day that I went to go see my academic advisor on campus.
Wow.
And that was like the contrast of like this world. And he was an encouraging individual because I shared with him my reality, my truth. Yeah, you can't share your story with everybody, but you got to find people that you trust. And there was that space. And I was like, man, I'm on parole. I'm like trying to do this and that. And he was encouraging, gave me some wise counsel. I applied it. Fast forward, I ultimately ended up graduating from UT a couple years later with the 4.0 GPA.
Man, that's amazing. That's amazing. And it really does show your persistence, your commitment to making change, and in particular, finding a new path to success. Whereas before you were trying to be the best at being the worst, now you're trying to be the best.
That part.
At doing good things.
Yes.
Where did music come into this?
Great question. Some friends invited me to the studio. Music was not my goal. Music was therapeutic for me. I was a consumer. I listened to it. It did something special. I didn't know that I could create it. Some friends went to the studio. They asked me to write a verse. I didn't know what a verse was. I mean, what do you mean? Like how long it is, how to do it. I figured it out. I recorded my first verse and something clicked, like just supernaturally in the studio. Like, wait, I think this is what I'm born to do. Okay, fast forward. This is when I'm in college, before I graduated. And then I graduate, and my last corporate job was working at a television station, an ABC affiliate. And so it was a big deal because, I go from prison incarceration to college graduation. I now work in television. Everyone in my community is proud of me, excited that knows my story, because now I have a different community of individuals. And they're like, yeah, you got a job, keep it, you got benefits, all that. But I would take off often to go like speak at a school. And I remember the first time I went to go speak at a school, because I was like, I got to give back. Like, I wish somebody would have told me in an authentic way where I would have heard what they were sharing. Because bottom line, people sucked at communicating to me effectively. And so I go to the school and I go speak. This is my first time public speaking. And this is a year or so after I wrote my first song and I spoke. And I was like, whoa, that same thing happened. Like, hey, I think this is my purpose. And so then I realized, like, I have to combine these two. I have to figure out how to, like, create my life around what I feel like I'm born to do. And that's how I came in.
So a lot of people listening to this who maybe are in the process of discovering what they want to do for their career, for their life. You said you realized this is, for me, this is the thing I want to do. Maybe this is my purpose. So I want to slow things down for just a second and look at the process. If you were talking to someone and they're trying to figure out what their thing is, how would you tell them to recognize that moment, how to find that thing?
If we're talking about purpose, then I would say you were born on purpose with the purpose. A great way for you to identify your purpose is to understand what your natural gifts and talents are. I have this question. What are you good at without trying that other people try to do and they're not even half as good? Not what you're passionate about. People confuse it. I really like they always say, I like this. That's not what I asked you. I said, what are you good at without even trying that other people try to do and they're not even half as good? And that's just my creative way of saying, like, what are you gifted at? That's why you're better than other people without even trying, because it's just a natural gift. It's a talent. And so then you start to understand what your talents are, and then you can build your life around that.
I love it. And I'm just going to talk about how much we agree right here, because I have a course on LinkedIn Learning called Discovering Your Strengths. And what I teach is you want to find the intersection of your gifts plus your loves plus your skills. And when you have something you love, that's you're gifted at, and then you also have developed skills, that's where your strength is. That's what you want to pursue. So we're saying the same thing.
I love a good Venn diagram. I just see it in my head. I'm like, that's a Venn diagram right there. Right there in the middle, that's the sweet spot, baby.
Exactly. And that's what you've done. You found that strength in all those things. Where did the first Grammy nomination come from?
After I figured out my gifts, my talents, more so my purpose, and understood my strength, and even my audience and my community, because I do corporate speaking, I do professional development, I do coaching. I also make sure that I entertain, inspire, and empower young people. But there's something special about. I've tried to get away from it. Like, cool, like that's good. I'll give back, but this is what I'm gonna focus on. And it was like, young people love me, I love them, and like this message works. And they actually don't have all the baggage that my adult peers have. So you share something like that with them, and they're like, boom, they take it and run. They're shooting me DMs on IG, like, hey, you came to my school, you said this, now I do that. Like, whoa. It's fruitful. So the first Grammy nomination came when I said, okay, I'm going to create a project for young people. And I played a part in a project that was geared toward young people. And that's where the first one came from.
I want to highlight something there where sometimes we have an idea in our head about what we should be doing as a career. But another indicator is paying attention to what people keep asking you to do.
Now I have to, what you just did when you're like, I so agree with what you're saying. So that's the second part. That's the second answer to when you said, how would you help someone identify their purpose? Well, the first thing I say is, what are you good at without trying? Other people try to do, they're not half as good. And the second thing I always tell them is, what do people tell you you're good at? People take for granted what's natural. So like there's a kid that can do math in their head right now. Somebody, right? Like 9 times 9. What's 9 times 9? Plus 9, plus 10. There's somebody that's right now is like 100, like easy. There's somebody else that's still stuck on 9 times 9, right? Like the person that does math in their head easy doesn't realize, like, that's not normal, right? Everybody can't do that, right? So it's like people have to tell you, you have to start to listen like, oh, this thing that's easy for me is actually special. Yeah.
And we inherently discount the things that are easy because we think that they're easy for me, they're easy for everybody else.
That part.
And that's not true. I mean, for you, you're comfortable getting up on stage, you're comfortable writing, you're comfortable freestyling, which, by the way, I'm going to ask you to do. So you didn't know that, but I'm going to put you on the spot. But you're really comfortable with doing those things. Most people aren't. Most people are terrified to get up in front of people and perform and stand in front of an audience.
That's what I want to shout you out on. When we were sitting next to each other, basking in the glow of dedicating our day of service to amazing individuals in the state penitentiary in Arizona. And, me and you and a bunch of other folks at the table, because it's awesome just to be able to play a part in that. I wasn't familiar with you prior to that moment. And then it was like you shared a nugget right? You shared some wisdom, and then you took everyone's attention at the table, and they were like, whoa, like, I got to get that, boom, boom. But it stood out to me because what you said was so wise and authentic and applicable. It was encouraging. So yeah, I was excited to be able to connect, because I'm like, most people don't get that.
I appreciate that compliment. Thank you. So talk to me about TEDx. I think a lot of people, they see them, they like them. You've done it 3 times, which is pretty remarkable. What is that process like to prepare for that and to give a TEDx talk? Because it's not easy.
Well, in the beginning, the pre-prep, you were like, hey, I'm going to ask some real questions. I might even make you uncomfortable. Okay, I was thinking to myself, like how? Like, okay, this is that question, because now this is a crossroad. Like, do I tell the truth, or do I, try to like dress it up and make it sound good for our professional community? But I'll talk like I talk to the young people. Because what I tell young people is, like, I tell some seniors in high school students, whatever. I'm like, hey, you ever heard of a TED Talk? Like, yeah. I'm like, cool. I'm like, adults always want to do TED Talks. This is a big deal. I've done 3 of them. This is when I'm establishing authority. I don't say that with them anymore, because they care more that I was on America's Got Talent than I did 3 TED Talks, right?
Know your audience, right?
Know your audience, right? They're like, what? Who's Ted? And like, people spend time preparing their 17 minutes, like maybe 17 weeks, who knows how long, whatever. I basically freestyled all 3 of mine. Like, there was no preparation. It was like, I did the first one, and apparently it worked, because that's what led to the invitation to the next one. And then that's what led to the invitation to the next one separately. And it's not just like no preparation, even though that's what it is, but I recognize to be able to put myself in that space. So if your question was, what was it like preparing for that? I just recognized that, wow, this is going to be like a snapshot. It's like taking a photo. I have much to share, but the point that I share here, this innovative, intriguing idea, is the one that will be like, there will be a snapshot and it will live on. So I made sure that whatever I spoke about added some value to earth in all essence. And I did 3 different topics. The first one was my story. The second one was that we all have multiple gifts and talents, and like how to best apply them in the order to apply them in. And then the third one was how we can all be the change.
So you mentioned that word again, freestyle. That's how you deliver. That's how you prepared. And I want to highlight that, because that also is a gift that's unique. Not many people have that. So there are 2 things going on in my head. When I see you deliver what you do, when you give a musical speech, I both identify with it and envy it, because I identify with the concept of freestyling. I feel like I'm best on stage when people are asking me questions and I'm riffing off things and I'm adapting to the audience. So I identify with it, but I also envy the heck out of it, because your ability to take that and turn it into something musical, that's at another level in my mind. Being poetic that fast. Where does that come from? Is that a natural gift by itself? Is it something that you've had to hone over time, that you've improved your ability to do? Like, how do you even practice getting better at freestyling?
The 10,000 hours is real, right? I know everybody that's listening knows what that means. Like, you got to put in your 10,000 hours. And it's like, yeah, put in your 10,000 hours. So, but the way you prepare, well, it's not, for me, it's not prepare. I think about present. For example, I want to shout out Chef Emerald. When people cook on television, it doesn't make sense that a person should be able to cook food and we care about it if they're on television. We can't smell it, see it, touch it, taste it.
That's a great point. Yeah.
Like, it makes no sense that there's a cooking show on TV. This is stupid. But a great chef would be a salesman, right? So it's like, it's well lit. They have the ingredients. They're explaining it. They have the artistry of how they cut a tomato, how they throw it in the bowl, how they stir it, how they describe it. Like, the sounds, like they're simmering on purpose. Like, they presented it so that you feel like, oh, wow, I want that, even though we can't touch, taste, or smell it. And so when I freestyle, the way I approached it was like, how do I bring this to life? How can I make this thing that's a natural gift and then present it so that it's an experience? And that's why, like, when I do it, I'll do some crowd input. Like, I might have people join me on stage. I might have people randomly throw out words. I'll take visual things that I see. You can text me. Right now, I'm working on how to incorporate AI into it, right? Because that's where we are now. And it's about how do I make this visual and an experience. That's how I approach it.
Yeah, and I want to call out your stagecraft as well. And for those who are not familiar, stagecraft is just your ability to work the crowd, pull people in, get them engaged. And yours is one of the best I've seen. And just to highlight that, when we were at the prison, you were doing that, someone brought up the word supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, right? And I know you've heard that word before, right?
It might be in all 3 TED Talks. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, but what I loved about it is you were like, wait, what was that word? Oh, it's super, and like everybody kept saying it and you kept pulling us in. It was like you were like letting out line in the fishing hook. And then when you got to the freestyle, you just nailed it. And it was the build up to it. If I'm trying to relate this to someone listening, you hold back a little bit so that when you deliver, people are surprised. They're like, oh man, that was fantastic. I think that's a great skill for any kind of presenting is you hold something back in reserve and then you pop it on people in surprise and they go, oh, wow, that was special. So kudos to you for that.
Thank you.
What are you working on now and where are you headed in the next 5 years?
It's a great question. One that I probably never have a clear, succinct answer for. Currently where I'm at, I'm excited. Our goal is to take Be the Change globally. It's really that simple. I started a social good campaign in 2016 called Be the Change. We've impacted millions of people. Last fall, we impacted 125,000 students. We inspired them to give back and be the change in their own communities. They collectively volunteered more than 75,000 volunteer hours. But the way Be the Change really works is we created this social good campaign. Then I wrote a book. Then we launched a sneaker company, Change Kicks. We launched a beverage company called Change Water. And again, I can't get away from my young audience, K through 12. And though I wrote a personal memoir that was more for middle school and high school students, I'm currently working on a children's book that's for K through 5 because that's half of our audience. And that's a snapshot of where we are now. And to continually, and our next benchmark for Be the Change is 250,000 volunteer hours collectively. Like we created a website. People can log in, they scan a QR code, log on, they share how they chose to be the change. And then we're collectively taking all this data to continually leverage it and create this snowball effect.
Okay. So one of the things I like to do in every episode, and maybe you heard this, is I like to highlight actions that people can take. Because my perspective as a coach, as a consultant, an educator is education's great. Knowledge is powerful, but what's more powerful is taking action, doing something about it. And I want my listeners to make your success story, SaulPaul, a part of their success story. So what I'm going to do, and I'm putting you on the spot here, what I do in every episode, I'm going to highlight 3 actions that someone can do today, this week, to make what you've shared a part of their life. I'd like you to share one specific action they can do. And either you can do that as part of a freestyle that riffs off of what I share, right? Or you can share one first through talking and then do a freestyle about the whole thing.
Okay. So you go first, though.
All right. So the first action that stood out to me in the beginning of his story, SaulPaul talked about being the best at being the worst. That was the choice that he made when he was in high school. What I would like you to ask the question is, what can I be the best at being the blank? If you want to be the best at being and fill in the blank. And I think there's power in taking the moment to think about that and answering it. What are you going to be the best at? And write that word down and make that a goal, something that you work on a regular basis. The next action is, SaulPaul said an interesting phrase. He said, you can't share your story with everybody, but you can find someone you trust. And I would encourage you to find someone that you can trust, that you can associate with, someone who's achieving what you want to achieve, and listen to that person, build that relationship with that person. Even if you can't find someone immediately, then choose an author, choose a figure, choose somebody like SaulPaul and say, I'm going to follow them and make them a part of my life. So that'll help me achieve what I want to achieve. And then the last one is just asking yourself the question, what do people keep asking me to do? What do people keep coming to me and saying, hey, can you give more of that? That's a sign that that's probably something you can do with your career. So pay attention to that and just answer that question. What do people keep asking me to do? And then that might give you a clue about where you can take your career next. All right, SaulPaul, do you want to share one within the freestyle? You want to share one outside and then tie it all together? I'll let you work your magic.
That's a great one. Let me see here. I'll just keep it simple. I encourage everyone, one practical action individuals can take is to visit SaulPaul.com and join the Be the Change Challenge. All you do is you sign up, someone will follow up. It's simple, and then you can be the change in your community. So I would be remiss if I didn't mention that. I shared a lot today.
Fantastic.
That's the big takeaway. Join the Be the Change Challenge. We look forward to being able to partner with you, bring it to your community as we entertain, inspire, and empower. That's an actionable item.
Fantastic. If
I was to do it musically, let me see. I'm gonna keep it simple. Like, so this is just a little freestyle. One of one that makes you the best. Work hard, also choose the rest, and realize that it's a task. And if you don't have it, maybe you should just ask. And that's the way that you can build community. Don't do it by yourself. Stand for unity. That's you and I, T-Y, that's you and me. I'm going to shine bright just like some jewelry. When it comes to the flow, yeah, I've been raw. I'm SaulPaul. That's Mr. Crenshaw. Y'all call him Dave. Some call him Super. Now check this out. Hey, no Lex Luthor. Does he drive? The car is more foreign. Now check this out. This podcast is far from boring. We high scoring. We doing what we do. If nothing else, you should be true to you. You have a gift. You also have a talent. Work hard, rest hard. Yes, you need balance. And my final choice is a challenge. You should join that. Be the change to the challenge. Hey.
Yes. That was fantastic. That was great, man. First, I had a big smile on my face, and then I started to have a tear come to my eye. That was beautiful. Thank you so much for that.
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity to do what I do.
Yeah. And so I just want to highlight, you're available for public speeches. You do that all over the place, schools, corporations, that sort of thing. And the best place to follow you is where?
SaulPaul.com.
SaulPaul.com. SaulPaul, you've been so generous with us, so much wisdom. Thank you so much for taking a time out of your very full schedule to share all of this with us.
Thank you for what you do. Continually give back, continually shine. Thank you for the invitation.
And thank you, everyone, for listening. Remember, it's not just about the knowledge that you heard, the story that you gained. It's about the action that you take. So make sure that you do one thing this week to make SaulPaul's success story a part of your success story. Thanks for listening.
You've been listening to the Dave Crenshaw Success Show, hosted by my dad, Dave Crenshaw, and produced by Invaluable Incorporated. Research and assistant production by Victoria Bedez. Sound editing by Nick Wright. Voiceover by me, Darcy Crenshaw. And the music is by Ryan Brady via Pond 5 licensing. Please subscribe to the Dave Crenshaw Success Show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you like to get your podcasts. If you have a suggestion for someone my dad might like to interview, please send it to guests@davecrenshaw.com. And please don't forget to leave us a 5-star review. See you next time.